So for my next series of videos, I'm going to do a playthrough of Bitter Woods, The Battle of the Bulge. I'm going to use the deluxe edition by L2 Design Group. This came out, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. Compass Games has done a newer designer's edition of the game. I've actually played that. It's very nice. But I have this L2 copy. I like it. Yeah, it's very nice compared to the original Avalon Hill game. This was one of the last game, or maybe the last game that Avalon Hill produced back in the early 90s before they went out of business. Designed by Randy Heller, and a lot of the map artwork and counters and stuff was done by Mark Simonich. So it's a beautiful looking game, and it is a really good system, a well thought out game with good mechanics, and it allows you to simulate the battle in a very like realistic way. It feels like you're playing the Battle of the Bulge. GMT Games is coming out with a game called A Time for Trumpets, which this is a regimental version of the Battle of the Bulge. Theirs is going to be a battalion level, so a much larger game, many more counters, much larger map, and that's coming out sometime next year. But I guess Mark Simonich is going to be working on that, and it's designed by, I probably can't pronounce his name, but Bruno Senigliori, I think is how you say it. And I'm on the pre-order for that, so maybe I'll do a series of videos on that game whenever it comes. Well, I don't have much of an unboxing to do here because, of course, this is my personal copy. I've played it many times. I do really like the artwork, though, on the cover of the box. Some American GIs getting ready to fire on the Panther tank. It's quite attractive. Okay. A friend of mine, we play this game often, actually, and we have to tear it down after every evening. So we have these charts made up so that we can keep track of where each unit is. I ordered this copy secondhand on Noble Knight. It came in the shrink wrap for a pretty good price, but not Noble Knight's fault, but it came without the rule book. So what I have is a photocopy of the old Avalon Hill rulebook. We'll go over this in a little bit. I also have a bunch of the known errata. That's weird. A lot of this is just answers and questions about rules of the game. Not much of it actually changes any rules within the game. It does come with a nice player's handbook, all kinds of designer's notes, and it has the scenarios in here, and it's I don't know, it just got some interesting things like American Field Artillery Group Order of Battle with a list of U.S. 5th Corps Artillery. I mean, it's got a lot of interesting information in it. You get one player aid card, combat charts and tables, then a bunch of setup cards. The Compass Games version, which again I've played but I don't own, has many more scenarios than this L2 Design Group, which is one reason I definitely am thinking about going out and picking it up. I just haven't bothered to. But different scenarios: Patton's Relief of Bastogne, Plan Martin, and then of course the Allied and German Order of Appearance cards. The counters are obviously all clipped and ready to go in boxes. I think the selling point of this game, though, is the map. The map is very nice. It's on this very thick cardstock. It's not a paper map. It's not mounted, but it's the next best thing to mounted. And it's a beautiful looking map. Large hexes, which is good because the counters are all large counters. And just the level of the level of detail is really great. Way down here you can see there's Elsonbourne and Malmedy. The other side here we have Clairvaux, and oh, there's Bastogne. Gotta check out Bastogne, of course. It's a big map too. It stretches, I don't really know exactly how big it is. I've never measured it, but it's pretty big. Covers up most of my table anyways. Let me lift you up here so you can get a better look at it. This is it has all the starting positions of like the units printed on the map, which is a big help in setup. I wish more games would do that. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go over the rules briefly before we start this playthrough. So let me reposition my camera a little bit. There we go. Okay. This again is not that complicated of a game. Hex encounter. Units have 3 ratings. You can see. Let me see. Let me show you. Right here. You have a combat strength, an endurance rating, and a movement allowance. And then the rest of it is just historical and bookkeeping notation. So 3 factors on each counter. The armored counters, actually, they have silhouettes, which is nice. I like that. Movement is pretty standard. You can move your full movement allowance with terrain modifiers, of course. Stacking is 3 units per hex, with the exception of the 82nd, 101st, and the Lair Panzer. Those, all 4 of them have 4 regiments. All 3 of them, I should say, have 4 regiments, and with they can stack all 4 regiments in a hex. Other than that, though, the stacking is 3. Standard zones of control rules. They extend across all all hex sides except the River Meuse. If you enter a zone of control, it stops movement, but you can leave a zone of control. It's not locking. Improved fort positions. Each unit has an ER bonus, an endurance rating. If you have the higher endurance rating, you get a die roll modifier. An improved position nullifies that die roll modifier. A fortification nullifies the die roll modifier, and on top of that, it means you can ignore a counterattack result on the combat results table. Obviously, when you're surrounded in a fort, you don't want to have to counterattack. Combat is simple. It's add up the combat factors, find the odds ratio, and roll the dice. This is there's a lot of a lot of moving units around the map, just trying to find the most ideal combat odds, which I happen to like. I think that's a lot of fun. This is a game that has a lot of pushing back and forth in the combat results table, but it also has a fair amount of damage. For instance, you can draw I don't know if you can make that out, a firefight result, which leads to a step loss for both sides. After combat, of course, the attacker can advance and can have a mechanized exploitation as well. There are artillery units in the game. They simply add their combat factor to the combat that they're within range of. They have to be within 4 hexes. None of the terrain blocks line of sight. You don't have to worry about that. So if your artillery is within 4 hexes, it can add its combat factor. There is aircraft support, which is dictated by the turn. Those can be added to apply column shifts to combats. The Allies can use air support also for ground support for cutoff units. For interdiction. I said that wrong. They can use it for interdiction to make travel across certain hexes more difficult for the Germans. Supply is standard. You have to trace back to a road that leads to your edge of the map. You cannot be more than 4 hexes away from a road that leads back to your edge of the map. If you're out of supply, it hurts your combat rating. It goes down by 1 on defense and halved on attack. Also hurts your endurance rating. That goes down by 1. Like I said, though, the Allied player can conduct airdrops, so they can use their air power to resupply cutoff units. Bridges in this game are pretty simple. The Germans the Allies, well, I guess either side, you can blow a bridge so long as the opponent is no more than 2 hexes or 1 hex away, I should say. See here in the diagram. If you're right beside the bridge, you roll the die to try and blow it. If you're 1 hex away, there's another die roll modifier for that, or a chart anyways. If you're more than a hex away, though, you cannot attempt to blow the bridge. That stops the Allies from just blowing up like all the bridges, so I think that's a handy rule. Rebuilding bridges is simple. You position, I think it's any infantry unit. Well, it says only mechanized and non-mechanized units may rebuild bridges. Yeah, I guess your tanks can rebuild bridges. I just never have them do that. It's always the infantry trying to rebuild bridges. Anyways, all you do is you get beside the blown bridge, place a repair bridge marker at the beginning of the turn, and at the end of the turn, the bridge is repaired. You can actually cross a bridge after it's repaired, which is in the turn. So you repair the bridge and then you get to cross it, which is kind of a nice thing. You can place units in reserve. It's as simple as putting the reserve marker on the units. They then get to move after the movement and combat is finished. It's a way to take advantage of gaps in the line. The Germans get to take advantage of initial surprise, which means they get a positive die roll modifier on the first turn of the game. The Germans have some movement restrictions. The 1st SS Panzer Corps are not able to engage in combat on the first turn of the game. And they also deal with traffic jams. You can get caught up on the roads in the early part of the game due to traffic jams. Reinforcements enter the game on a set chart. They have their entry hexes all described. You can't hold them back, and if you wait a turn, kind of move them to another side of the map if you want, which has happened in games I've played with Patton, where instead of coming in near Bastogne, he actually had to come in down near Namur or the Meuse River. Victory conditions are pretty simple. The Germans have to get units across the Meuse River and off the map. If they get, I think it's 3 units across the river and off the map, one of which must be mechanized, they win the game. A German tactical victory is if at the end of the game he has 3 supply mechanized units, one of which must be armor across the Meuse. So you can have a tactical victory by just having units across the Meuse at the end of the game. A draw is any other conclusion. An Allied victory is if the Allies control, I think it's Marseille and Bastogne at the end of the game. If you've been able to stop the Germans from achieving their victory conditions and you control those 2 cities, the Allies win. There's a lot of optional rules. I won't go over all those rules. It takes forever. But I'm going to use a bunch of them. I'm going to use flanking attacks, which gives you a positive die roll modifier when you flank. SS Panzer Scare, same thing, gives you a positive die roll modifier. use attrition later on in the game. Units that would normally simply take a retreat result have to take a loss. It's a good rule. There are general units. The generals help. They can stop you from retreating. Let's say you're within range of a general unit and your units are required to retreat due to the combat results table. You can ignore that result and instead take step losses. Help stop units from being destroyed by retreats. Oh yeah, that's the other thing about zones of control. In this game, you cannot retreat through zones of control. If you retreat through a zone of control, you're instantly eliminated. There are hidden fuel dumps in the game. Kind of hard to play that rule solitaire. If you look on the map, see if I can show you. If you look on the map, where? Right there. See at Samri, I should say. There's a fuel dump there. There are fuel dumps. There's one near Spa. There's one there. And if the Germans don't take control of those fuel dumps, they have to roll on a fuel on a movement table, which tells them this division cannot move this turn. So the Germans obviously want to take control of a fuel dump, or they'll run into logistics problems. Inter-Allied cooperation. The British, because of some of their constraints in the Battle of the Bulge, they cannot move freely around the map, and battles, they cannot fight. Well, they can fight with American units, but because they sometimes were mixed up in their command, if they fight together, they take a negative die roll modifier. There are some random events, which I always play with. This is how you get the Von der Heydt parachute into the game. It also represents the atrocities at Malmedy, commandos. It also has Jagdtigers. You can get Jagdtiger counter in the game if you roll a 6. You just roll this. You just roll on the random events table, and whichever one you roll is the one you get. To be honest with you, I've never actually played a game with the Jagdtiger counter made it in. So let's cross our fingers and hope that happens. And there's a combined arms bonus. If infantry, armor, and artillery all take part in an attack in a clear terrain or lightly wooded terrain hex, the attacker gets to have a positive shift on the combat results table, which I think is really cool. The terrain is pretty straightforward. You have clear, light woods, broken ground, hilly ground, forests, towns, roads, and rivers. And that's pretty much it. The rivers are all the same size or the same class of river except for the Meuse. The Meuse has some special rules about where you can cross and if your zones of control reach across the river like we were talking about before. And I would like to mention about rivers, probably the one thing about the movement that I wouldn't call it complicated, but it kind of trips people up at first when they first play this game, is how the rivers work. It's really simple. Armor, except for Panzer IVs, and remember all the counters have silhouettes on them, but armor, except for Panzer IVs, cannot cross rivers except at a bridge. Infantry can cross a river if they start the turn adjacent to the river. They cannot simply run up, jump over the river, and keep on going. They have to start the turn adjacent to the river. Really, that's as simple as it gets. It's just for whatever reason I sometimes have even had a hard time remembering it. Well, anyways, this is Bitter Woods. We'll start this up next. I'm not really sure exactly how I'm going to run this. I figure I'll do 1 day per episode, or maybe 2 days per episode. I don't know how long it's going to take me to do these turns, because honestly, usually when I play solitaire, it can take me hours sometimes to do a turn. So doing it in this format where I am narrating everything, I'm not positive of the time frame. But anyways, I'm going to start that up pretty soon, and hopefully we have a good game. Okay, thank you.